This is Real Talk, the customer insights show with Jenn Vogel, a top-rated live stream and podcast in the market research and insights industry. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen on all major podcast channels. Join Jenn and her guests for a weekly discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Real Talk is presented to you by VoxPopMe, the leader in video research and ranked number 1 in qualitative research by Grit 2 years running. Here's today's conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand their customers better. I'm Jenn Vogel. Happy Monday. Today, I'm excited to talk about Agile innovation. I'm joined by Nic Umana, Global Agile Innovation Leader at Mars, to dive into the subject. Welcome to the show, Nic.
Thanks, Jen. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you on the show. We're going to have a fun chat today. To get us kicked off, can you tell our audience a little bit about your career in the insights industry?
Sure. I think I've had a little bit of a less traditional entry into insights, which I think has helped me along the way. I come from a long line of bankers, and so I was at university doing a banking and finance degree and not really loving it. And I did an elective, which was consumer marketing, and I just found my crowd. I really loved it. So as I was finishing my degree, I worked in retail jobs in a department store and a national department store, and then a national retailer for supermarkets, a no-frills retailer actually, and then moved into the consumer packaged goods industry and found my home. So I've been in consumer packaged goods for 20 years, more than 20 years. I did a decade in sales, lots of different roles across sales, and then the next decade I've spent in marketing. So in marketing, lots of insights-based roles focused on growth strategies. And the last 3 years before this role in our global digital acceleration team, which was really fun and taught me a lot about what it is like to do a global role and build capability around the world. And so led me beautifully to my role now, which is our global Agile innovation human intelligence leader. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Amazing. What was it like transitioning from, you talked about a decade in sales and CPG to a decade in marketing. What was that transition like for you?
It was okay. It was interesting. When I did a lot of work in category towards the end of my sales career, and I worked in shopper marketing and shopper insights. So we changed the org design. So it was an easy transition into the marketing organization, but it also just was a really different way of working. And so it just took me a little while to find my feet in marketing, if I'm honest. But also I just found a place that I really thrived and loved to be. As much as I loved my time in sales, I'm future focused and I'm creative. And so I found that I was just able to thrive. So I really came to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I can imagine that could be, there's probably a lot you bring, right, from your experience in sales into a successful marketing role, but also quite a challenge to move from one to the other. And so you describe yourself as a chaos pilot, which I love, who brings structure and action to a chaotic situation. I really want to talk about that a little bit. Why is there chaos?
I guess I get bored very easily if I think about my personality type. So I love to be in roles that are on the frontier, and often even in sales, I'd be getting the roles, as I was coming back from maternity leave. We don't know if this is a job. So see if you think this is a job for someone in the future. So I had lots of roles that were the first time this job has existed within an org design. And that is a place I just really love to be. I think if you are always operating on the frontier, there is chaos. And so part of what I guess makes that a happy place for me to be is I have a fairly high level of comfort with ambiguity. I'm really curious. I think I'm good at connecting the dots. So I love nothing better than to get in and do an assessment and start to, I guess, work out in a situation, regardless of whether it's an internal focus or an external focus, what is it going to take to win? What might be some of the obstacles and how might we overcome them as we start on the journey? So I'm addicted to it.
I guess you kind of have to be. And, being in roles where, gosh, like, oh, this is the first time this role has existed. So, what does it look like for that role to be a success? And then, by the way, it's going to be chaotic because you're doing something that's never been done before and also have to prove that it's working. I mean, there's a lot of pressure there too.
There is. I think it's easy for me because the way my brain is wired, and my mum would tell you she doesn't believe this, but it loves to organise things. It doesn't always extend into my personal life, but my brain loves to organise information, and so even like if I'm out at a restaurant having an experience, my brain just thinks in processes, and I always try to redesign a better process as a consumer. And so automatically, if I'm thinking about something, I start to build frameworks in my mind and connect dots. And so I think why I love to work in chaos is because I think once you've done a quick assessment of it, there's real power in getting this base level of discipline and consistency through frameworks and processes. And they really help you get teams or an organization grounded and aligned and heading in the same direction. And there's real joy in that. I think that's the only way to be able to tackle a situation if you haven't had to do that before.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I mean, and that is a very probably unique skill, right? To be thinking about, to look at chaos that way or look at a problem that way and just automatically be connecting dots and creating processes. But, is that really the key to making the chaos work for you? Or like, what do you do to make sure that you're driving things forward in the right direction?
Yeah, I think that's yes, it is. It's a way to make the chaos work. I think that is, if you think about the fact that I'm working in a business that is about innovating in an agile way, yes, the agile human-centric design and decision-making linked to innovation is what helps us make the progress that we need to make, and it helps us design innovation that is actually valued by consumers. So it's enabled us as human intelligence leaders to be able to guide the teams with confidence into the spaces we think will drive growth for us moving forward. But you never know until you're live in an experiment if things are going to work or not. So
Right. Totally. And that's the part of this episode that I'm really excited to dig more deeply into on agile innovation. But before we do that, let's take a quick break, an early break in this episode, for our weekly segment with Vox Pop Me's VP of Research, Brian Munchine. This week, he shares 3 research hacks and 1 bonus life hack. Let's check it out.
Hey everybody. So we've all heard of life hacks, and I'm a firm believer in taking advantage of life hacks in daily life. So stay tuned for one of my own personal life hacks. But first I thought, why not bring that way of thinking into the research world? So here are some of my research hacks that I've found have been helpful in getting more accurate consumer feedback. The first one is that I've seen that consumers can't always articulate how they make a purchase. And in a typical online survey, you may not capture the most accurate response for that. So my hack for that is using eye tracking to get the response in real time. while they talk through their thought process. And it usually works pretty well. I've seen survey responses where half of the sample said they never once looked at a menu board. Yet when we used eye tracking, we proved that every single one of them actually did look at it. So the video doesn't lie. My second life hack taps into the world of neuromarketing. So whether we know it or not, all of us have unconscious biases that can impact our reaction to something. And this can happen in research too. So to combat that, I like to use tools like facial coding, which can measure a reaction before a person is even aware of the emotion they're revealing. This is also called System 1 thinking. An example where this could be used, so let's say that you have a brand that has some ingoing negative biases, and you're trying to get feedback on their advertising in a focus group setting. Chances are the reaction to the ad may be lackluster in that type of setting just because of the ingoing baggage that that brand has. However, using individual facial coding where the reaction is immediate, you might see more smiles and engagement throughout the spot, which is likely a more accurate response to the ad. And then my third life hack is it has to do with consumers' ability to remember. So we sometimes will ask them about a purchase or an experience from 4 weeks ago. So let's think about that. If I asked you to give me feedback on something that was a month ago, your memory would probably be pretty hazy at best. I know mine would. But if I asked you to give me feedback of that experience in real time via video, your responses would definitely be a lot more informative and likely a lot more detailed and accurate. Video also captures their environment that they're in, their facial cues, their tone, all of which are really insightful nuggets of information that can help with telling the broader story. So those are my research hacks. Okay, now for my personal life hack of the day. So the next time that you find yourself painting a room in your house, what you want to do is take an elastic band and wrap it over the top and bottom of the can. And then that way, when you go to wipe off the excess paint, you're going to wipe it on that elastic band and it's going to go right back into the can instead of wiping it on the side and making a big mess down the side. So that's my life hack.
I love that we can get a painting hack as well, because I'm about to move house and I have 3 children.
Well, there you go. You are going to need that life hack. I'll tell you. So Brian and I often talk about DIY versus non-DIY with our home projects, as well as our research methodologies. But my life hack for painting is hire a painter.
Me too. Get an expert to do the job.
Get an expert to do the job, 100%. It's one of those tricky ones because I can do it. I can paint. But it's always better when I have the pro do it. So, and I speak from experience. My painter is showing up tomorrow to paint my new office. So next time you see me, hopefully, guys, I'll be in my new office after a long time of construction. But some of those research hacks, you know, there's a lot of really forward-thinking, interesting technologies that are emerging in the space always. And I mean, was this kind of what you were tasked with bringing to the business when you were in your kind of digital acceleration role?
Yes. I think when I think of hacks, I think of the role that TikTok plays. My daughter, I've got a 10-year-old daughter who is probably spending far too much time on TikTok. And so I think that's what I'm always looking for in my role is what are the hacks? What is the tech that is evolving and what is going to help me do my job in a more efficient and effective way? So absolutely, it was the cornerstone of the role that I was playing in the digital role. And in particular, my role was supposed to be digital shopper insights. And I was like, oh my God, if this isn't just about the shopper, this is about marketing. And the role became a marketing and shopper role. And as the landscape evolved, it became incredibly important for us to work out how we could continue to reach consumers in relevant ways, in relevant moments. And also the beauty of the environment as it evolved was that consumers would be giving us signals all the time that they would be about to come into a moment. And so then our role was to be there and make it easy for them to find a treat or find a snack in that moment, and make sure if they do online shopping, we could get it into their basket. If they were going back into a physical store, they'd think to buy us. And, you know, the ways we can get products is constantly evolving on demand, just opens up incredible opportunities for us as consumers, as well as for brands to play a role in giving people what they want when they want it. So yes, it was a really good groundwork, I think, for the next step for me in this role. And I've been working in this role now for a year and a bit. So
amazing. Well, this is what I really want to dig into now, is your current role in Agile innovation. So let's talk about that. How do you define Agile innovation?
Yes, I was stealing my own thunder a little bit before because I can't help but get into it. So we talk about human-centric design and decision making, and we talk about that as it's linked to innovation. So as a human intelligence team, we enable our full community of people working all around the world. So we have a community of over 200 people working on our pipeline for the next 3 to 5 years. And it is a model where we have to be obsessed with what the consumer wants. And we talk about going from an idea or an opportunity space into what we call an MVP. So what is the minimum viable product that you could build quickly and get out into the world and test to see in real world, is this going to be something that consumers would be able to find and buy and like buying and then buy it again. And so as quickly as we can, we try and get that product out into the real world. But part of what I think is critical, and what we weren't as good at in the past in our old model, was not just starting in building and collaborating up front with the consumer, but all the way along through the process, checking in to make sure we understood what they like, what they don't like, what can we improve. So for me, it helps us to move much more quickly. It helps us to fail faster, which is a very valuable thing for a big business that's investing millions of dollars in innovation. But I think most importantly, it helps us learn and optimize, improve, even when we're scaling. And I think that is the most valuable outcome for us as we, continue to test and learn, not just the products that we're building, but the process that we're using to design our 3 to 5 year pipeline.
So when you I love it. When you say, like, get an MVP project, a minimum viable product, out into the market and test in the market as quickly as possible, how quickly are we talking?
We're getting better. It depends on the complexity of the challenge. Yeah. And so what we say is there's no one size fits all, because we're doing some projects that are really close in and they're just about transforming our core, but also we're trying to do some really disruptive space. And so I have been helping out on a little passion project at the side, and within 8 weeks, we've gone from having an idea to nearly being ready to launch in the market, and it's a really disruptive space. So we can move quickly if we need to. It depends on whether we're building a solution internally or if we have to find a co-manufacturer. It depends on the route to shopper. It depends on whether it's a new brand or an existing brand. So there's so many things that determine the speed, but we can move pretty quickly. Like sometimes it would take us 6 or 7 years to build a really big innovation. So it's certainly a very different business model.
Yeah, no kidding. 8 weeks is unbelievable. That's pretty incredible. And I think, like, you guys have you at Mars have certainly challenges that, like, we at Vox Pop Me don't have. When we're building MVP features or products, if something doesn't work in 24, 48 hours, we could just turn it off. Like, working in technology, it's a lot easier to get things out and also take things back. And like you said, fail quickly. But there's a lot of complexity to creating physical products that need to be sold through a channel or, another source. So, 8 weeks is just blowing my mind right now. That's amazing.
That's not an average.
It's not average.
That's
But
one of the better
possible.
examples.
It's possible. I mean, a couple of years ago, that would never be possible.
No.
So that's really impressive. But how do you handle the fail faster side of things? Like when something isn't quite working, how do you pull it?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we learned year one that we're not very good at killing projects because if you think about a more legacy mindset, we've just spent 7 years building this perfect something. So we are going to do our best to launch this around the world and make it work and, overcome all of the obstacles. So it's really different. And there's different things that allow you to kill a project. But part of what we're talking about as people who are guiding the learning plan is what is most different about the learning is that it is hypothesis-based learning. So we need to, as quickly as we can, work out what we know already in this opportunity space, work out what the gaps are, and what is our level of confidence in those hypotheses that we've built, and design experiments to help us prove or disprove those assumptions as quickly as we can. And so part of what we're trying to get really good at is having the right sequencing. We talk about D, V, and F, so desirability, viability, and feasibility. So having the right sequencing of those hypotheses, but also writing hypotheses that would help you kill a project. And so part of what we have is sessions with our community to boast about, what have our biggest failures been, but proud of that because, we explored this, we worked out why this wouldn't be feasible more long term, but there are learnings that we can take out of this project that we can put into something that might be a slightly different take on this. Or even a failure might not be a complete killing of a project, it just might be a pivot. And so it becomes a really valuable way to think about this model, and it becomes one of the really important mindset shifts that we are trying to role model where we can in talking about failure and talking about capturing and codifying that learning that we get out of this failure and using that to help us build better innovation in the future.
Yeah.
So it's not the dirty word that it used to be.
Right, totally. And your process is just so much more iterative than, like you say, 6 or 7 years to build the perfect thing. And then it's really hard to pivot. Whereas the expectation going in is, this isn't the final product. We know that going into it, it's not the final product. We're going to continue to iterate to turn it into something great, whether it's what we originally planned or if it goes down a different route. And that's just it's such a flexible kind of environment to be in, and certainly allows you to be really creative and react to changes that are happening in the market in the meantime, right? Because the decision that you made on day one to launch that product in 7 years, certainly the world has changed during that time. So it really allows for that, for taking that into account in the innovation itself.
I think you're totally right. And I think, as you were saying that, I was just reflecting on one of the biggest changes for us in the growth strategy that we have for this pipeline that we're building is we call it a slow and controlled skate ramp approach. So instead of launching this out into the world and putting millions of dollars behind it in media, it is a slow and modular scale that enables you to continue to learn. And, we design an MVP with a target consumer in mind, but we have, the next layers as we're growing this proposition that we know we want this innovation to be relevant for. So as we scale up, we need to continue to be flexible to learn and optimize. what is very tempting for our business leaders is to say, oh my God, we love this. So how can you make it twice as big and do it twice as quickly? And that's absolutely the wrong question to be asking our teams, because part of what we want to do is grow in this controlled and modular way that allows us to continue to have the flexibility to design the right value in. And so when we talk about a target consumer, we've done some really great work with some great business partners that we have at BMI. We talk about what is this consumer problem that we have, who is the target consumer that has this problem, and thus what are the pains and the gains and the jobs to be done as we think about developing a solution for this consumer, and how might that change as we scale up this solution, and how might we find that someone different is buying this that we couldn't have even imagined is buying it, and this has happened with one of our innovations. Then actually what might we do differently to make this value prop more attractive for that target consumer? Could we change the recipe? Would we show up in a different place for them to buy it? And so it becomes really fun, but also like a little bit nerve-wracking, because you just sometimes feel like you've never got that end minimum lovable product locked in. So eventually I think you have to call it, we're early days in, so we're at go to scale for 3 or 4 products, which we're really proud of. And I think that we'll be able to have more go to scales more quickly now that we've learnt the foundations of how to get from an idea to proof of concept quickly. But it will be really interesting to see what happens when these products get out into the regions and into, I guess, more traditional systems, because one of the challenges that we also have is that a big, successful global business is made to spit out new ideas and new innovation. So part of a launch and love program and an incubation program becomes really important, so you can be patient and grow innovation, but know the role that it is going to play in your portfolio. So it is likely that we are not building your next big blockbuster M&M's product. And so the role of the regions in this innovation model becomes a very different one to the role of the centre that's focused on the 3 to 5 year pipeline as well.
Yeah. Very complex. Very interesting.
I probably just confused you. This is my world and I live.
No, you know what it is? Like, I'm just trying to keep up, because I've got questions from like stuff you said 10 minutes ago that I'm like, wait a second, can we go back to that? No, it's so interesting. And just like, I'm still sort of blown away by, the ability for a company the size of Mars to be moving this quickly, which is definitely a new experience, I'm sure, for everyone. So it's really interesting. I did want to step back actually to something you said when you're talking about the kind of hypothesis and what you're testing in market. You talked about DVF, the desirability, viability, and feasibility. Did I get those right?
Yes, very good.
Can you
come and join the team anytime, Jen?
Amazing. Don't tell Dave. So can you tell us a little bit more about those and like what they mean?
Yes. I forget that everyone doesn't dream about DV and F like I do. So
we will after this episode.
So when we're in human intelligence, we call ourselves people, and we're obsessed with human understanding and understanding what is desirable to the consumer. But you could waste a whole lot of time in working out what is desirable to the consumer, but it doesn't really matter if it's never viable or feasible for you to make this product and to turn it into a long-term profit-making model, or a model that delivers against other success metrics that you might have and reasons for doing this beyond it just being incremental NSV. So we talk about, can we make this? And then we talk about, would it be a feasible business model? Is it worth us spending our time and money in building this up to scale and being patient with that slow burn, skate ramp approach? And is it worth our while to do this? And I think one of the challenges that we have is, like, I've joined so many conferences that talk about VUCA and this volatile world and the changing landscape. And I think just when you think you've got it cracked, tech can change, and it can really upset the apple cart, and it can open up new opportunities, and it can take away opportunities. So it's being able to consistently have your finger on the pulse and just know, what is the tipping point for this product, or what is the right point that we'll get to where we know this is really something that we should back, or actually this is something that we might just take a step back on as well. Did I answer that question, Jen?
Yes.
I think I did.
No, that's a really
that's
perfect, simple. I love the, you can, there's a lot of things that are probably desirable to consumers.
Yes.
If you can't make it, or if it's not worth it to the business to be investing in it or put the resources there, then, you redirect elsewhere. So it's really a very sort of formulaic way of prioritizing.
Yeah, and we talk about, like, it will be very hard to build big brands like we have now in our portfolio. So we talk a lot about what do we do to keep our big core brands healthy and continue to recruit consumers and remind consumers that we exist. And our role is to find the incremental opportunities on the top of that. So it's not just about what is desirable, it's also about how does this help us have the right portfolio that meets the evolving needs of consumers in snacking. So, if health and wellness becomes much more important to us, what does that look like for our portfolio, or what does that mean for new categories that might help us have a better rounded portfolio? So emotional wellness is definitely a place that I am currently trying to push the business into. But there's lots of places we could go, and we need to talk about where we should go and why, and how that gives us the right overall portfolio as well.
Yeah. Ooh, emotional wellness is an interesting topic. I'd love to dig into that one too.
Do a whole podcast on that.
Right? We definitely could. So, I mean, this is probably, a big pivot again at some point recently for Mars to be, focused on this sort of agile innovation approach. What would you recommend to other teams that want to get started on this journey that maybe are still on a 6 or 7 year innovation timeline?
Yes. Look, I'd say to you, if we go back to talking about chaos, I think it takes discipline and a clear process. And so I felt like initially when we embarked on this journey, we left far too much up to the teams on the how, and giving them some consistent processes and tools to use really helped us be able to be more decisive. I think it's so important where you can to have a cross-functional team who is working in sprints, which means a really different way of working, really different communication styles, much faster decision-making, consensus in those teams instead of top-down, and the independence of those teams where you can achieve that becomes incredibly important. So we've got this opportunity space. We think this is what an idea looks like, and now go and explore that and come back and tell us how would you take advantage of that opportunity, and is this something that is DBF that consumers would desire, that's viable and feasible. And so things, this timing couldn't have been better for us, because things like in a pandemic having to innovate, but tools like Mural have become really important for us. So we all work on the same boards. We all work in Agile tools. So Vox, PopMe, one of our favorite tools, and the tool that we often use to explore the conversation with the consumer and make sure our assumptions are right and work out, what we don't know in this space that could be value that we might build in, is important. And then I think time gating is important to go through we've got key stages that teams need to work through. They get metered funding, so they have to, get all of their funding approved, and it has to be linked into hypotheses and learning plans. So being able to come back within a certain time frame and say, this is what we've learned, and so this is what we're going to do next. So, this is the next round of funding that we need. But I think the biggest unlocker for us is locking in a consumer problem, being very clear on this is the problem we're solving for. This is the target consumer. This is what they will value. This is where they shop. This is how we'll catch their attention. And so all of those things become the critical roadblocks, I think, to build innovation that is really going to be differentiated and better than what is already in the market. We truly know what you need, and we are giving you a solution that is easy for you to buy. If you think about the fundamental needs of confectionery, if we're talking about, an impulsive product that sometimes I don't even know I need it, but I do need it now. And so how am I going to get it quickly if I don't have it at home already? So things like the consumer pains and gains and jobs to be done really help us. And then just as you go through a process, be constantly checking in with the consumer, and you shift from what we find is when you start early in the process, you shift from qual and Vox putting in more one-on-one conversations into building out those core elements of your MVP, and you should shift into more iteration and then validation. But the best thing you can do is just get into the real world. So as quickly as we can, we try and get into the real world and have our experiments running in the real world where consumers are buying us and telling us what they think. So there's lots of things, Jen. It isn't a simple answer because it's a really big change, and it takes time and patience and trust. Psychological safety. Teams have to feel like they can take a risk and make a mistake, and that it's going to be all right. So there's lots of ingredients for success that we've been able to unpack. And I think just when you got that first base layer, like we're thinking about, okay, what does this next layer look like for how we might build efficiency, or lots of things that we're learning. Make sure we're working on the right projects, make sure we're sending the right projects in as well, becomes a really core conversation as well.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be alignment across all teams and all layers of the business, right? To have that freedom and that safety and be able to do things a bit differently. That's always a little scary. So the support is really essential. And you're really, hammered home the importance of the consumer being involved at all stages. And you've been mentioning it, we're a human-centric team. It's human-centered innovation. And so how do you go about bringing in the consumer to all those different stages that, you mentioned a couple examples, but how do you do that across the innovation cycle?
Yeah, we do it all the way through. So right from, looking at what signals are we getting from consumers. So we have a foresight team that is dedicated to feeding in all of the right information, human intelligence and trends information that we need to know which places we should play in and why. And so we have conversations, we talk about, what's a total addressable market for an opportunity space? Why would we go here? Is it a blue ocean or a red ocean? Should we play here? Could we win here? And once we've got through that stage and we define opportunity spaces, all the way through, starting with a tool like a Vox Pop Me, we are talking with consumers, we're asking them questions, we're showing them concepts, we're asking them about how they're currently, satisfying the needs for this problem that they have to solve. And as we get further through the process, we ask the right questions based on the level of confidence we have and what we need to learn. And so they can be very different questions. But generally what we find is our sample sizes increase, and we shift into a mode that feels a little bit more like iterating and validating. And then we get into much more holistic testing. And as I said, we try and get out into the real world as quickly as we can. And even if we can't, doing, online conversion testing or virtual store tests are things that we will think about depending on how complex the challenge is to solve. But even when we get into the stores, I think you can make the mistake of saying that this product is successful or not because it's delivered these dollars or it's delivering this profitability. And ultimately, that's the wrong way to measure early innovation. We have to be pragmatic and know that it is going to overcome the business goals that it needs to become an incremental and valuable part of a long-term portfolio. But we need to give our innovation time to grow and settle in. And so being able to evolve those metrics of success and understand what do consumers really love when it's in the store, what don't they love. So things like some virtual reality work that we do with a company called Nailbiter, where you can go into a store, hold up your phone, and you can see the concept that you've built in the actual competitive set with the products in the aisle become valuable to us. But I always go back to, I say this all the time, there is no one size fits all. It depends on every experiment we design depends on what is our hypothesis, what is our level of confidence, and what will it take for us to feel like this is working well and we'll move to the next stage. So
yeah. And I think what you said that was really interesting, it's not just when you do get something into the market, you can't just base the success on how much sales or revenue has come from the product. You still need to understand the consumer. And vice versa. Also, you can ask the consumer all day long before you launch it if they would buy it. But like you were saying earlier in the conversation, it's so important to get it to market as quickly as possible because that's where the real test is. So it's neither one of them is good enough on its own. But if you have these processes in place to bring all of it together, then you've really got the right data to make those decisions.
Yeah, and you're minimizing the risk. You're learning more and you're making the risk smaller and smaller as you go along and giving yourself more confidence that you've built a solution that is going to be valued and that will be scalable. That is the hope.
That is the hope, right? Well, I think what you guys are doing is so incredible. And like I said, I've had a lot of conversations with people like yourself who are doing amazing work in these huge, global CPG companies, and some that move quicker than others. And everyone is trying to move faster. And what you guys are doing at Mars is just really incredible. And so thanks for sharing a little bit of your secret sauce with us today.
Okay, thanks, Jen. We couldn't do it without tools like HubSpot Me.
Thank you so much. We're thrilled to be a partner of yours. Thanks everyone for listening in today. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with another episode later this week. We'll see you then.